Welcome to another episode of the Young Terps Podcast. Maryland takes down Auburn 31-13 in the TransPerfect Music Bowl. I'm Mason Viner. Ahmed Gafir, you've been in Nashville all week. What was your game take from the press box at Nissan Stadium?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I felt somewhat confident about Maryland's chances kind of going into it. And then obviously that first quarter start, Billy Edwards said post game, that they knew that first 15 plays they were going to start aggressive. And the first 15 plays offensively, that match exactly that. Obviously, Maryland was able to jump out to a 3-touchdown lead early on in the first quarter, able to outgain Auburn 226-42. I mean, it was pretty clear cut in the press box who the better team was from beginning to end, and it was Maryland. So again, I thought it was just a complete win, probably the best win for this Maryland team, probably since the Indiana game, honestly. But yeah, definitely a complete performance and a great way to end the 2023 season.
Yeah, I called it a statement win earlier. I'll echo that statement right now. The way the teams are playing in the bowl games, the way that Auburn came out, they looked like they weren't ready to play. Obviously, there are a lot of opt-outs, but that's what every team's dealing with right now. Coach Loxley kind of mentioned that. He alluded to it in his post-game comments, but for me, it's a statement win. It shows it's a testament to where Loxley has his culture, that the guys came out ready to go for the third straight year, winning the bowl game and showing up kind of. I mean, the NC State game was a bit of a nail biter, but the Virginia Tech game, they dominated. This game today, they dominated. Would have loved to see some more points, maybe one more Cam Edge drive in the second half since he was so backed up on that first drive that he got. But Loxley, stick to the plan. He did what he always does in the bowl games. We saw a lot of guys, some bright pieces, especially in the secondary with Perry Fisher, a guy that you called out earlier in the week.
Yeah, Fisher definitely I think he probably had the breakout game, offense or defense. But on the offensive side of the ball, you mentioned obviously just kind of what Cam Edge, Billy Edwards were able to do. It was really interesting. I thought, kind of it'd be a little bit more, I guess, a hard deadline or hard cut on, when Billy Edwards was going to play and until when, and Cam Edge. But, obviously in today's game, Maryland was able to kind of rotate freely. Felt like you had to really pay attention. Cam Edge came into the game there. I believe Billy Edwards started that drive. And then obviously Cam Edge came in, first pass, 57-yard bomb, hits KP in stride down to the Auburn 3-yard line to set up that touchdown there. So, again, I thought offensively what you saw from the quarterbacks, Billy Edwards obviously was able to start 6 of 10. A lot of combination between, just some inaccuracy or a little bit of lack of power on some of his throws, a couple wide receiver drops, but Edwards did have 10 consecutive incompletions to end the game, but still felt like there was enough to give Loxley, give the staff to kind of evaluate that QB room. And Loxley talked about it post game, that second half. If you look at it, Maryland ended up only outgaining Auburn by 10 yards in the game. And that second half as a whole, Maryland just kind of really struggled there. Only finished with 41 total yards there. And Loxley mentioned, he wanted to, one, still be able to give the quarterback some plays where the staff was able to evaluate them, while B, just kind of eating the clock a little bit, obviously with the game, just a comfortable lead there.
Yeah, it's a couple of bright spots. I think that the tight end room for Maryland remains strong. Preston Howard had a nice game. Dylan Wade adds a touchdown. A.J. Zemansky showed what he can do in the blocking game. And as they develop that room going into next season, obviously almost just the parity of last year. If Preston Howard can find a way to become a really, really effective blocker, the Terps will have another NFL tight end on their hands. At least that's what it looks like right now. If Dylan Wade continues, they'll have a 2 tight end room once again, and then Zemansky just gives them some much needed blocking power in the run game.
Yeah, I think, kind of just between Dyches and Rico Walker leaving, I think probably adding another tight end kind of still makes sense. But it really just feels like, Preston Howard's kind of, ascending into Corey Dyches' role in 2023. And Dylan Wade is just going to kind of, replace Preston Howard's role as that second tight end in Maryland's offense as things currently stand. So I think obviously both of those guys have been able to showcase themselves. I mean, we've talked about Preston Howard, how he's such a fluid athlete and was really just about learning the tight end position. And you got a chance to see that through the regular season. Obviously today where he finished with the 1 catch for 5 yards there. And then obviously Dylan Wade, even when he was when he committed out of high school over Purdue and Rutgers, I believe, were his final 3. But he was a prototypical type of tight end athlete that Mike Loxley wanted in his offense. And despite enrolling in June, he's really been able to hit stride there. So yeah, I think that the tight end room has looked good. And then it was kind of good to see, Roman Hemby bounce around a little bit. Colby McDonald as well finished with six attempts for 23 yards there. But again, I think the tight end room on the offensive side of the ball, if you're not looking at the quarterbacks, it was probably them where you're probably most impressed.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that running back room. Obviously, we'll have plenty of time to talk about what next year's roster is going to look like, but you almost have to think Eli Mason probably not going to be the third option. Obviously, Nolan Ray will come back. Terps add a pair of running backs in there. They have guys that can flex into the backfield, but Roman Hemby, hopefully they can find some offensive arm that can run block for him because he can make plays. This year, just not really gone his way.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the case. I think just kind of building off of what he was able to do, and again, just kind of being that primary option in that backfield, I think is going to help him. And I think it'll be kind of interesting to see, how Billy Edwards, whether it is Billy Edwards who wins the job, but just I guess I was kind of assuming there based on today, but whoever the starting quarterback ultimately is, it will be kind of interesting to see how they're kind of able to lean on Roman and how they're able to kind of complement each other, and whether it does make a difference, whether Maryland is able to add some balance. But that running back room as a whole, I think Nolan Ray, who's really been sidelined all year, I believe the only appearance he made was against Towson, and I've not seen him at practice really since then. But I think he's gonna probably be that change of pace back next year. But probably try and find a bruiser, which is obviously kind of ironic with Anton Littleton leaving and former Maryland running back Penny Boone looking like he's going to another Power Five school after a good year at Toledo. But I think kind of for what's in the room right now, I think Hemby and McDonald have kind of shown a little bit more. I think it's just kind of adding and kind of adding a complementary piece to what they have.
Yeah, I don't think we can do a show this season without talking about the offensive line, at least for a second. I mentioned earlier in the week on our preview pod, I was hoping to see some more rotation, but really not much today other than Emilio Moran gets a couple snaps there at the end. I don't recall seeing Eric Harris much at all in what would be his last game as a Terp, but mainly we will be seeing, four new linemen next year and Kyle Long, who had a really solid game at both guard spots.
Yeah, I thought he did. I mean, I think really at times this year, I believe he had all but 2 games this year, drew a couple starts. I mean, I thought he's looked good and really pushed Amelia Moran there for that, fifth and finals starting spot at guard there, really through the, spring ball into fall camp. So I think he's a pretty, wouldn't, say 100%, you never say never, but pretty strong candidate to kind of take over one of those interior offensive line guard spots there. Obviously, we mentioned, Josh Gatlinberger, the former Purdue lineman, he's kind of already with the team and whatnot. I think he's going to be able to kind of take over that center spot. We mentioned Alan Huron joined the team, be able to take one of the tackle spots, Leoba from Georgia. I think he'll be able to, another strong candidate to start at guard there. So again, I think it'll be really interesting. That's going to be a big thing. And, obviously DJ Glaze, after he accepted that Reese Senior Bowl invite, that very likely, even though he hasn't announced yet, that very likely ends his Maryland career. So going to be a big task for Coach Brian Braswell to rebuild the trenches once again and kind of get everything going, especially with a new quarterback. That's a tall task, but we'll see what the next 9 months look like on that side of the ball.
Yeah, let's flip it over to the defense, who had a fantastic game. And it started off, Loxley called it the movie trailer for next year. And if that's the case, this front seven is looking like it's going to be the best, possibly the best group on this team.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Tommy A, Quayshawn Fuller, Tyzay Johnson, all those guys. Jordan Phillips, saw him a couple times in the backfield. All those guys, though, did a really good job getting in the backfield and kind of disrupting the pocket there. I mean, Peyton Thorne, we kind of mentioned going into the game that he wasn't much of a threat, and he finished under 100 yards passing for the first time this season, completed under 50% of his balls. And Auburn as a whole, they finished with under 100 rushing yards, again, for the first time this season. So I thought that the defense really looked good. And when you look at a lot of these guys that stepped up, again, the front seven, and then you're looking at Caleb Wheatland, who had a couple of really big plays, Kellen Wyatt, who was able to kind of bounce back after a scary early hit there. Clean, but, scary. But again, Ruben Hippolyte, I think that's kind of probably that big domino, maybe that what if on the defensive side of the ball. But again, I think it's leaning more likely than not that he's back for 2024 as we wait for his official announcement. But again, like we said, stopping Auburn's rushing attack was going to be priority number one for Maryland, and the front seven answered the bill.
Yeah, and it was a great matchup. We talked about that. The Terps, with so much on their front seven and not knowing about the secondary, but props where it's due to a guy like Perry Fisher, who hasn't been called on much this year, who gets his opportunity and takes advantage of it, along with Jaquan Shepard, who had a solid game. Lionel Whitaker, who's out there most of the game, a guy who, there were a lot of high expectations for, but he hasn't necessarily, this year it seems like we've seen less of him than we did last year. So he steps up into that role. And then at safety, I mean, between Glendon Miller and his like nickel and then safety spot when Dante Trader goes down, Dante Trader, the plays that he made, he got robbed of that interception where the Terps committed a penalty. And then Bo Braid, who opts back in after looking like he wasn't going to play, and just, I'm going to miss watching him on the field. He's been a really good player to see. He had a couple of big plays he could have made, but just fall short. But the Terps defense, I mean, they get the job done in the secondary. Give some fans some hope going into next year.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I thought obviously Glenn Miller, I thought going into the season, he was probably that most underappreciated guy on defense. And I think he really continued to show throughout the 2023 season. I know obviously Bo Braid and Dante Trader back there and Glenn Miller being able to fill the nickel role. And when Bo Braid sideline fill that safety spot and just kind of be able to be a jack of all trades there in the secondary. And he's really stepped up. And I think he's going to be a dependable option in the secondary. But Perry Fisher, again, he was a guy, I mentioned it before, but he was a guy who was all about the athleticism, and his experience at quarterback kind of gave him a leg up, kind of learning, the IQ, the tendencies at the position at cornerback. It was all about putting it together. And he really, outside of the one pass interference, I believe that resulted in an Auburn touchdown, the first Auburn touchdown there. Perry Fisher really had a good game, 3 tackles, 2 pass deflections, 1 tackle for loss. And I think this was really his first extended run, first real big time to shine. And again, you're looking at the cornerback room next year, Jalen Husky, who's already with the team, but he very likely locks down at least one, definitely one cornerback spot, starting spot there. But trying to find a second guy is going to be the next question there. And, whether Perry Fisher is that second guy kind of remains to be seen. But what Perry Fisher showed you is that he can be a dependable option in the rotation, as can Lionel Whitaker. So that'll be an intriguing room to see.
Yeah, it certainly will. We got to see, all the pieces of this defense. Unfortunately, we don't see Neo Avery at all this year, but
Yeah.
you're sure that he's going to be able to have an opportunity to break into the rotation come next year as the Terps look for a pass rusher. Ahmed, you're shaking your head. He's going to be there when he's ready to go.
I mean, when we were talking about the front seven, I didn't even think about that. We were talking about what the front seven could look like next year. I mean, I believe it was August, maybe it was early September, when Locks was asked about Neo Avery, and he said, "Do you expect him to make an impact this year?" And Locks was like, "Oh yeah, like he." So that's going to be a fun piece to add to their front seven. So yeah, again, and Donnell Brown, we didn't really bring him up today, but that's another guy that's coming back. Kellen Wyatt. So there's a lot to like with what the front seven currently has.
Yeah, one last guy to shout out, Daniel Wingate, who gets back in. We've seen him show flashes at times. Mike Harris, we didn't see as much of him as I thought we would. I know I texted you during the game, was like, I can't believe he hasn't played. Dylan Gooden's getting reps, and Mike Harris hasn't really been out there yet. But, Dylan Gooden was our breakout guy. It didn't quite happen yet, but he definitely saw him on special teams. You saw him kind of break through and get some time for the first time this year. But Daniel Wingate looks like, kind of the next piece, or maybe the missing piece with Jayshon Barham's departure there at the linebacking group.
Yeah, I thought exactly that. I mean, I think the inside linebacker room, if I was, kind of saying if the potential Ruben decision goes the other way and he does leave, then, the inside linebacker room is kind of looking like Caleb Wheatland and, Daniel Wingate, Mike Harris are kind of, immediately thrusted into impact roles, or obviously Maryland adds at least one guy from the portal at that position. But I just think, again, both those guys were Mike Harris and Daniel Wingate enrolled in June, and they've been able to show flashes. So I think they're going to continue to make that inside linebacker room kind of a strength of Maryland's defense in 2024 again.
Yeah, Ahmed, a couple of players that played their last game for the Terps that I believe deserve a shout out here on the show. Deshaun Jones, obviously the guy you have to talk about. He's just been such a big part of it. You had a piece on that this week over on InsideTheBlackandGold.net. But just, his impact on the program deserves a shout out here.
Yeah, I mean, I remember talking to him when he was in high school. Still only feels like it was 2, 3 years ago when Coach Beatty was recruiting him. And yeah, I mean, I interviewed him on Thursday, and at the end of it, he was just like, I appreciate it. You've always been good to me. So he's taking a lot of shit from fans, but there's a lot of people that around him and just kind of interact with him on a daily basis that have nothing but good things to say about him. And I think it's a testament that both him and Fanaja Gote, both guys, really the lone exception of guys that were not initially recruited by Mike Locksley's staff to Maryland, and just embraced everything about the program, became leaders, became cornerstones, became enforcers of the standard of what fans are kind of sick of hearing, but it's true. So definitely deserving of a shout out there.
Yeah, three guys on the D line that I have to give props to. Christian Teague being one of them. It looks like he's played his last game for Maryland, coming in from Morgan State. A guy from Maryland that's really stepped in and taken up time over his years here in College Park since coming in. Isaac Bunyan, another one that I believe really deserves some props. A guy who walked onto this roster. We've seen him over the last couple of years. And then just the way that Trey Colbert came in, moving up levels, comes in, fills a huge role for Maryland that was kind of left open by Mosiah Nasili Kite, who was on the other sideline during this game. I don't think hasn't done much at Auburn, and of course Henry Chibuzi, who chose to leave. But the Terps, really, I mean, they get some guys there that they don't always stand out. They don't get much props, but they've come in and plugged holes that were really just voids left by the cupboard not being there for locks coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I think Teague and Bunyan are prime examples, and I need to do a better job of it. I'll take accountability for that. But the walk-ons really don't get a lot of coverage like they should. But the walk-ons, especially under Loxley, a lot of these guys, Sean Greeley's another guy.
Yeah,
A lot of these guys,
another.
yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys have stepped up. They've developed. They're not just pieces in the program and to fill bodies. And those guys ended up playing integral roles. I have a subscriber, I believe it's Wade, who kept asking me about Bunyan going into the season, and a lot like those guys don't get overlooked. So and then Trey Colbert, like you mentioned, a lot of people when he committed, people are like, "Who the f is this guy? D2? What the hell are we doing? We can't compete in the NIL era." And I think again, I'll go back. It's another example of the same of what the Indy Hall did a couple of years ago, where everyone shit on Maryland for signing them when nobody else but the Maryland staff saw what the roles that they could come in and fill, and they came in and did exactly that. Trey Colbert is another example of a guy. They did their homework. They knew him. They knew what they needed along the D line, and he fit that to a T. So I just think. Again, I say that to say that the conversation among fans, I think, needs to change into why are we taking him from a judgment perspective to an understanding perspective, if that makes sense. So, shout out to Trey and his loan season with the program.
Yeah. Two more that I got to get to. Obviously, Tarib still, he opts out today, but still with the team. You saw him a bunch on TV, just kind of behind locks. It's so strange when you see guys that are like still with the teams that have opted out, but that just a testament to the guys wanting him around. Not to say they don't want others around that opt out, but you always have that option to stay with your guys, even if you don't play in the game. And Loxley opens up that door. And then Bo Braid, I already mentioned his impact, but coming in, picking Maryland, getting some late interest from some bigger suitors, but another guy from Maryland who stays here, develops over time, didn't play much. I think might have been Wayne that asked him a question about that, kind of, reflecting on it after the Michigan game at home. And other than his famous line about, "I want to inflict pain," in that same media session, he just, talked about how much it's meant to him to play here and to be here and to want to be here and have his family root for the team. It's just, really great when those guys develop. And that's one of the things that Loxley's built his program on early.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect testament to say Tarheeb's still a former 3-star who Maryland is now preparing to send to the NFL, I think. And again, he was a guy, he came in, innocent impact guy, special teams in that secondary. So he's been just like Deshaun Jones, and I'll talk about Bo Braid, but all these guys, I mean, they've been true building blocks into changing what Maryland is inside and out. So I think that he's been a hell of an addition, and I think kind of even inside the locker room and things like that, the way guys talk about him, he's a hell of a guy. So and then Bo Braid, I want to change up a little bit. Bo Braid on the first day of fall camp, he called me after the first practice. We had media day earlier in the day, obviously, and just get a chance to talk to them. And obviously, Bo Braid and Dante Trader, both those guys are best friends, and they play the same position. And Bo called me and said, I just thought of more things I wanted to say about Dante. If you have a couple minutes, and he went on for about 10 minutes just talking about how him and Dante became closer as friends and how they started pushing each other in the weight room and how that became more of a friendship and how they roomed together and that blossomed into their podcast and going into business together. And I thought it was really interesting. Bo Brady, he's a guy, obviously safety, but that's 4 position coaches in 4 years. And you mentioned the higher suitors in high school. Michigan was after him pretty hard. He took an official there and opted to stay local, play for Maryland. And I just think kind of in the NIL era where a lot of fans are kind of dead set that every player wants a bag and that's all they care about. Bo Braid is the poster child of the perfect type of athlete, the model athlete that fans want in college athletics. Great player, better person. There's nothing like I can't say any good things, any more good things about him. I mean, he's just been a class act in every setting, and yeah, I feel like every way that he's represented the program, he's been nothing but good guy. So great family too.
Yeah, I mean that's most of the guys I want to get to. If Ruben Hippolyte does go, in another pod, I'll have to talk about him and just how great he's been over his time at Maryland, both through the media and just off the field. I mean, these guys just what they do to contribute. I mean, they featured it in the broadcast today, the charity work that they've done, the podcast that they've done, all that stuff. Just example guys of who you want in your room, especially when you needed to kind of change things like Maryland did. Ahmed, reflecting on it as a whole, 8-5 season, back to back now, a Duke's Mayo Bowl win, a Music City Bowl win. Loxley, he takes a lot of heat from the fans, especially at times this year, and deservedly so for the team. But he certainly has Maryland in a place that's been a long time since the Terps have been here.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the fans when the losses and you start to see the same routine stuff that makes you kind of roll your eyes. And I get the mentions that it's same old Locks, same old Maryland, fire Locks. This is our ceiling. This is the end of year 5, and at this point, like I said, Deshaun Jones, Fanaje Gote, both those guys, they're Loxley guys at this point because they've grown and they've developed and they were brought back by Loxley. So this is Loxley's program, and I would say obviously 2018 that's a tough season for Jordan McNair and what happened, but when Loxley took over versus the end of this season, I mean, there's no denying that the program is going in the right direction. And kind of where does Maryland stand? It's kind of similar to last year, but it's not. It's not Maryland. They can't get over the hurdle. Maryland is still plays away, and closing that gap is still going to be the biggest question. And I think obviously you look at this past season. I think a lot of fans will look at the Northwestern game and probably say, hey, maybe that wasn't an awful loss. Sure. Maybe it was a more winnable game considering it was more about Maryland's lack of control or lack of emotion and just kind of really coming out flat in a frankly dead environment. The Illinois game will always be, I think, that what if on the season. But again, it'll be really interesting to see how Maryland does in the new look Big Ten. But I can't say that the season is necessarily a failure. I think Maryland continues to take strides, and the fact that they are still plays away in my mind. I think kind of still gives them some ammo on the recruiting trail, and I think is why they were able to, lock guys down like MJ Morris, like Jalen Husky, who had Oklahoma after him pretty hard too. That Maryland's been doing good. So yeah, I think the biggest question now is how does Maryland fare in the post Talia era? But maybe this does sound homerish, but I just feel like Loxley at this point, he's kind of shut enough people up over time, and it'll be kind of interesting to see what he does and how he does it. But I have confidence that by that UConn game next year, both sides of the ball are going to be looking kind of good. But who is under center will be interesting.
Yeah, you mentioned the big question going into it. For me, I like many of you that are listening were very angry on the field after the Illinois game, very angry on the field after making that trip over to Northwestern. And Ahmed, you said it. I mean, dead environment is almost. I've seen high school games with more juice than that place had during that. It was a really really strange game, and that was a strange day. And when there's things that kind of make you slap yourself with this season. Like, where's the Billy Edwards quarterback power on the 1 yard line in 4 attempts at Northwestern? That probably pushes them over the hump in that game. Where's that play against Illinois? Where's that play in so many short yardage situations where this team just didn't get the job done? That's kind of the thing. But look, Locks has Maryland in a place that it hasn't been in a long time. And I think that doesn't get enough credit, doesn't get the credit it deserves. I still go back to what I heard when Maryland moved to this league, which was they're never going to win bowl games. They're never going to win, 8 games in a season counting the bowl. They're just not going to be competitive at all. And then the NIL era, the same thing. And I know, Ahmed and I kind of parrot each other with the NIL thing, saying, it's kind of a joke that Maryland can't compete in the NIL era, because that's not where college sports is, in a much stranger place, but also a much different place that I feel like is what's portrayed by the national media at this point. But he's shown yet again that he can compete in teams that Maryland should beat. Most of the time they do. Got to clean up the things, have got to get the offensive line's got to catch up to where the rest of the team's at talent-wise. And it's going to be a fun spring. There's going to be some new faces, local guys that come back, through the portal. Obviously a quarterback competition. Obviously Ahmed's going to have all the coverage on Inside the Black and Gold. But, it's going to be a fun season, because the defensive line certainly at a competitive level. Now it's just the offensive line. They got to find a way maybe to pick up one more guy, 2 more guys in the portal, and really build some depth there with the high school guys they brought in.
Yeah, they probably need one more guy, I think, on the O line. And then again, yeah, I think it'll be kind of probably defense side of the ball. It'll be kind of interesting to see if Maryland does add an inside backer. I think that's kind of maybe the one question. But again, I think it'll be just kind of interesting. Just kind of interesting overall, just kind of see how the whole picture comes together. But again, this is the first or the second consecutive SEC opponent that Maryland has beaten in a bowl game since obviously the win over Tennessee back in the early 2000s. First time Maryland's won 3 consecutive bowl games in consecutive years. First time that Maryland, again, back-to-back 8-win seasons for the first time since, I believe it's 02, 03. There's a reason that I'm saying first time since, like, there needs to be an appreciation of where Maryland has come, and acknowledging that, how Maryland's going to be able to beat now the Oregons, now the Washingtons, along with Ohio State, Michigan. We'll see what USC looks like. I'm not ready to pencil them in it yet as a Big Ten elite, but Maryland just continue to show how they'll hang, or that they will hang, and how they'll do so will be, like you said, Mason, will be fun to watch.
Yeah, it sure will. Season starts off in August this coming year. The Terps will welcome in UConn to CQ Stadium to start it off. Ahmed, anything else to add?
It's been a fun ride, fun week in Nashville, but ready for the offseason in full swing now. Yeah, well, not too much offseason for those that cover Maryland. Terps obviously have the #1 team in the country coming in this coming week. And basketball, as Big Ten play kicks off, we'll continue doing the pod here as basketball season starts to get rolling into conference play. We'll have more time spent on basketball, football recruiting as the portal window kind of closes, and then we'll see where the Terps are at heading into spring ball. Ahmed, been a first fun football season here doing the Young Terps with you, and we'll continue to roll. Yeah, I'm excited to see it continue to grow, man. But definitely a fun year. Yeah, certainly. And as always, you guys listening to it allows us to do so much here on the pod. Make sure to subscribe it where you get it, like it where you can. And as always, thanks for watching and thanks for listening.